Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Michael Rahn, founder of The Sum, a financial planning firm in the Woodlands, which is just outside of Houston, on the show today. Michael started his financial services career with Thrivent before quickly realizing that job, that side of the industry wasn't for him, and he ended up in a large retail-focused firm for about 10 years. He ultimately decided to leave and start his own RIA and has seen pretty astronomical growth since launching a year ago. He now has 21 ongoing clients, and with a $4,500 annual fee minimum, he's crossed the $200,000 of annual recurring revenue mark. Michael has found success working with retirees and soon-to-be retirees in the oil and gas industry and has a unique fee structure that works well for that client base. We talk through various parts of his business, including his fee structure, his service model, his marketing strategies, as well as his hiring plans and what he sees as the future for his business. I should caution listeners that this is one of those holy cow, he has grown really fast stories. And while it might not be everyone's growth path, we all have a lot to learn from the work that he's doing. But maybe don't count on hitting quite the same revenue targets that Michael has. Have you ever wished there was someone to handle the time-consuming tasks of researching, performing due diligence, monitoring, trading, and rebalancing your firm's assets under management, or someone to facilitate reporting, billing, and invoicing for your firm? XY Investment Solutions, powered by XY Planning Network, handles all of that and more, leaving you free to focus on what you do best, serving your clients. Learn more about this turnkey asset management platform built for the next generation of financial planners and their clients at xyinvestmentsolutions.com. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/218. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors that we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Michael. Hey, Michael, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, Alan, thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me. Excited about what you guys are doing in the industry here.
So let's give listeners just a quick overview of you and your practice. Where are you located, when you got started, maybe number of clients, and then we'll dig in from there.
Sure. So the Sum is located in the Woodlands, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston, about 40 miles to the north.
I love that 40 miles is a suburb. That's great.
Houston's a little bit different than most cities. Like we're 100 miles across, it seems like.
Right.
But yeah. Anyhow, that's why we don't have a train system here, because it would take hours to get across town, I guess.
But I interrupted you. So you were saying, yeah, you just celebrated.
Yep. So we just celebrated 1 year on July 11th. Currently serving 21 families on an ongoing basis, and it's me and a part-time employee right now. Hopefully another employee pretty soon. Still starting to look.
All right. So now you may get a few applications. So anyone looking to work in the Woodlands. And then do you have any type of client niche or ideal client profile that you use at this point in growing your practice?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit unique in XY in that I do serve Gen X and Gen Y, but my niche market, just based on my history, is mostly retirees. So I do a lot of transition planning, income planning, and a lot of those clients are actually in the oil and gas industry, just given that we grow the stuff here in Houston.
Yep, fair enough. Awesome. Well, let's just talk about how you got into the business. So has this always been your career, or were you a career changer into the industry?
It's mostly been my career. So I got a degree in finance, and right out of college, I went to work at Bank of New York, and I worked in their CDO department, if anybody knows what that is. And I did that in 2007, and the company actually merged with Mellon and moved to Pittsburgh. So I decided not to go. And about that same time, I met my parents' financial advisor who worked at Thrivent Financial. And after a few Q&A sessions and learning about what he did, I actually moved from Houston to Austin and went to work for Thrivent right in the heart of 2008. So,
yeah, best time to go work. It cracks me up the number, and maybe it's just the age, typical age of a member, because our median age is about 39 years old. But at XY, but the number of people that are on the show that talk about that first job or in the industry being in 2008. It's astonishing to me how many people survived it.
Totally. And I went from a complete high at one company to a complete low at the next, thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm trying to start a business while the market is failing. So somehow managed to survive there.
And what is Thrivent's model? Is it, base salary plus commissions based on sort of what you're growing? Did you get a base salary, or was it purely sort of building your own revenue from ground up?
It's the latter, but when they take you through training, they pay you. I think I was making a couple $1,000s a month while I was getting licensed. So
Big money.
mainly, yeah. I was mainly living on savings and sleeping on a friend's couch for a while, but I got through after I burned through all of my money and went with my tail between my legs trying to find a job elsewhere.
Fair enough. And I think that's a pretty typical story with companies like that the ones who make it make big money, and the ones who don't go find another job. So yeah, well, how long were you there for?
Less than a year. So maybe late '08 to spring of '09. And from spring of '09, I went on to a big retail brokerage firm that many household names would recognize, and I spent about 10 years there.
So did you have any thoughts about, big company, with a big retail presence kind of thing versus smaller company? Like, were those both options available and you liked one over the other, or was this just really the opportunity that made sense?
I think it was the latter. I think I would have preferred to be in a smaller team setting, but at that point in my career, I think I was more concerned with being able to eat than anything else, pay the
Understood.
bills, so to speak. So, yeah, I probably applied for, I can't even tell you, 40 plus jobs or so, and this was the one I got, and it was certainly a godsend. It turned out to be a wonderful 10 years. So.
Yeah. So, what were the types of positions or roles that you held during during that decade?
Yep. It was a really fun time because the company was growing tremendously. And so I started out just working the front counter, depositing checks, making IRA contributions, sending out wire transfers, doing operations. And shortly after, I moved into, I guess, sort of an advisor light kind of role and did that for about a year. And then I moved into a full on advisor role and did that for maybe 4 years and had a book. At that point, I was probably at about, let's say, 400 million or so under management. And I got the opportunity to move into a regional role. So I left the advisor client face to face role, moved into a regional role where I got to see how the business was running, how the local office was running, and then help with the coaching and training of the advisors in the place, sort of a business partner, but also a coach and a trainer. And that was a lot of fun. I did that for about 2 years and then realized that I really, really enjoyed being in front of the client. But behind the scenes, I was also thinking that there was a different way to do business, right? So I went back to my client-facing role and left the company a couple years later. Had about 900 clients I was working with, and at that point, about just over 2 billion in household net worth that I was working with.
And $2 billion in net worth. That's a lot.
Not net worth, sorry. AUM would be a better way to
Oh,
say that.
so you had a $2 billion book of business?
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. So yeah, when you go, I mean, I imagine you were making crazy money if you're managing $2 billion for any company like that. That's a valuable role, and you're making, and especially if you've proven you can do business development and bring in those clients and convince those clients to work with you. So, what ultimately drove the decision to leave? I mean, were you able to bring $2 billion over with you to your to your next practice?
Yeah, good question. It's not that type of book is not what you would see at a typical RIA, right? That $2 billion number, you would expect it to be a massive, massive income, and it was certainly a wonderful income, but it's not as big as what you would expect hearing that number. I think the answer to that question goes back to maybe 2011 or 2012. There was an FPA conference in San Antonio, Texas, whenever that was, and I met Michael Kitzes, or listened to a presentation of his, and I remember thinking, we're giving advice in a totally different way. And it just sort of spurred me down this path of, here's how things could work. Here's how we're doing things. And so I just started studying, and I started learning, and I started wanting to provide advice sort of unhinged, if you will. And yeah, years down the road, I just got to a point of what I wanted to do for clients and what the firm wanted to do and what we were allowed to do. They just didn't line up. And so after a while, my wife and I had plenty of discussions about this, and decided that it was best for me to leave on a good note, thank them for the years of awesome opportunity there, and start a place where I could serve clients the way that I wanted to.
So, did you have thoughts of, going somewhere else, maybe to a smaller RIA and getting a job versus starting your own, or at what point you were ready to leave, did you feel like starting the business was really the best option for you?
Oh my goodness, I would have loved to have partnered with somebody locally, but unfortunately, it didn't work. I probably talked to every advisor here in town that would take my phone call, and I think it's a similar story that I've heard on here a lot of times. Just they're either not interested, or you're not the right fit, or our philosophies don't line up, or and I think part of that too was me saying that I really just want to be in a spot where I'm able to provide advice without a conflict to the best of our ability. And so, yeah, I would have loved that, but I just wasn't able to find it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's amazing to me the number of XYPN members that, had there been the right job opportunity, they probably never would have started their own firm. That they weren't driven by the desire to be a business owner. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong there. But, if other opportunities had presented themselves, then they might have taken it. And that's why I'm excited to have almost 1,000 advisory firms now that are doing this model, because hopefully we have enough that are then starting to hire that first and second and 10th employee to create thousands of job opportunities in this space, doing this type of work that a lot of advisors really want to be doing.
That's incredible that there's 1,000 XY members now. It's crazy.
Almost there, but probably by the time this goes live, we'll be there. So
That's incredible. Yeah, and back to the starting your own firm. I'm not sure that I wish that experience on anybody. I mean, it's certainly an emotional roller coaster, and I remember planning for this. I've listened to every one of the podcasts, and I remember hearing the things that folks listen to, and me thinking, oh, okay, well, now that I know that, I'll avoid that. And one of them was, the highs are high and the lows are low, and I just remember telling my wife one day, I don't think you can avoid that. This is part of it.
you really can't. I mean, people ask like, "Oh, you make it easy to start a business," and like, "Hey, we make it easier."
Right.
And starting a business is easy. It's a form that you file with your state to get your LLC registered. That's not the hard part. It is the emotional side and the roller coaster. So, I mean, I like to be as honest and transparent as we can about that process. How would you describe? You say you wouldn't wish that on anybody. I mean, how would you describe that process to someone who's thinking about it?
I say that tongue in cheek. It's been the best experience that I've had so far, but there's you get full control of everything, but at times you feel like you have control of nothing, right? And that part is a real challenge if you're used to being in a place where there's business coming in, and you leave one company and you have to sit and wait, and then you have employment agreements that you have to navigate, and then you have things with the state that you're waiting to get registered, and then you have to figure out the tech stack, and then you have to wash the coffee cups, and then there's just so many things that go into starting a firm that you don't think about leading up to it. Now, one of the nice things about all these podcasts that you put out is that list of things that we haven't thought of gets a whole lot shorter if you pay attention to these.
Right. And that's the goal, is that, we can learn from each other and learn from those wins and those losses. But the emotional journey, there's no eliminating it. Now we can buffer it, and that's why we're huge proponents of study groups. That's why we, a lot of what we offer is trying to move people through the challenging piece of the process, as quickly as possible. But in the end, the emotional journey is there, and I will say there is no level of success where that emotional journey does not exist. That is entrepreneurship. That is running a business. Is in the end, it never stops happening. It just changes.
And I think after a while, you start to thrive on it. Is that fair?
I think so. I mean, you either thrive on it or you find ways to eliminate the emotional journey. I mean, if you get to 50, 75, 100 clients, whatever it is, and you sort of want to stop or push pause and not grow anymore and really just work with those clients, then the number of potential emotional pieces, it certainly lessens. I mean, it definitely can go down. But if you're, interested in growth and what comes with growth, and those are the kind of things that will continue to happen, it changes. The conversations change, but they never go away.
Yeah.
So talk to me about launching the firm. So you had not worked in sort of an independent RIA up until that point, it sounds like. And so what was your journey towards, discovering and really being able to get the firm initially launched?
Yeah. Yep. So in my previous firm, we had the ability to refer out to RIA firms. And so I had a lot of experience with them across the country. And I saw a lot of them here locally. And I saw a lot of things that I liked and a lot of things that I didn't like. And some of the things that I didn't like is what we were charging clients for and what clients wanted to pay for. And that was probably the biggest thing that when I was interviewing and trying to figure out what my next step was, is I was trying to figure out who's doing this now and where can I go and partner with and continue to grow that type of business. And I just didn't find a fee structure like I set up or like you all are proponents of. And so one of the things that drove me to build the firm on my own was to say that, clients are really looking for advice on the things of the CFP: retirement planning, income planning, investment planning, tax planning, estate planning, insurance planning, risk management, behavioral counseling, all of those things. And that's not necessarily covered in a 1% AUM fee. And then there's a conflict involved with that. Every time you have an AUM fee, you have, and a client wants to take money out, there's an inherent conflict with that if it makes the most sense for them to make a financial decision in that manner. And so I really wanted to create a space where we could sit down and have problem solving conversations. And I was being compensated fairly for it, and clients felt like they were paying for good, solid advice.
Did you have a sort of a typical client in mind when you were building the firm, or did you sort of start out of like, oh, just sort of figure it out, or did you have enough experience, getting clients in your previous role that you sort of knew who you were going to be working with?
So I didn't have a ton of experience getting clients in my previous role because this being such a big place and probably one of the best marketing places around, clients would just come in the door. And so it was very easy. We didn't have to do anything proactive per se. But I did know what my expertise was, and that was helping, high net worth individuals who had complicated compensation structures and, restricted stock options and DC and DB plans. Do I take a lump sum versus lifetime income, non-qual deferred comp, anyway, Roth, all of these things that I did on a daily basis. And I remember listening to XY and I'm thinking, we have to help millennials? I have no idea how to do that. And then, well, I mean, I am one, so I suppose I know what I'm doing and I can share that with folks. But the short answer is I wanted to stick with what I had been doing because I felt like I had a lot of at bats at it and I had a good system that was working for my clients.
Yeah, one of the misnomers, I guess, of XY is that you have to be a millennial and you have to only work with millennials, and that is not the case. As I mentioned earlier, the median age of a member is 39. It's actually the cutoff year between Gen X and Gen Y, meaning half of our folks are Gen X and the other half are Gen Y. And there is a chunk of baby boomers as well. So not a perfect 50-50. Yeah, and we have advisors who are working with a slew of clients. Really what we care about is that do you have a service model and a business model and a fee structure that allows you to work with clients that don't necessarily have assets, that aren't, that don't have $500,000 or more sitting in an IRA waiting for you to come manage it. Which, is while that certainly applies to millennials, it also applies to a lot of baby boomers and retirees who have their assets locked up in other forms that it's not necessarily liquid in investable accounts.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also, it's nice to be able to help our peers. And it's also a wonderful business decision to diversify your client base a little bit, in my opinion.
So you go to launch your own firm. So remind me, what was the time frame for this?
So I left my employer. I turned in notice June 1st of last year, and they accepted my 2 weeks. So June 15th, I got registered on July 11th of 2018.
Wow, 3 weeks. Welcome to Texas. That's
Hey,
awesome.
no, that was you guys.
Well,
good job, compliance team. Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah. So 3 weeks in, you get registered. For anyone listening, it does not always go that quickly. So please talk to our sales team or our compliance team to get an accurate, just because, some states just take a lot longer than others. So talk to me about your fee structure. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was that it is a little different. And so, you have this ideal client profile and the folks who you're, focused on working with. So what is your current fee structure?
Yep. So I did take your all's advice, and it's posted right on the website. So if anybody wants to see it, take a look at it. And it's not anything to be fearful of, because I think clients see it and they love it, or they don't call you, and that's okay. So I I took the starting point of the old 1% rule, and I thought through how much time it actually takes to provide advice to clients based off of the fee that was being charged in that, right? And what were we actually paying for? And at my last firm, there were just a lot of layers of people involved, right? You had a service team, and I had an assistant, and there's an asset management team, and there's a research team, and there's all of these teams, and there's a lot of different things. And here, it's me plus one. And so it's with technology and the tech stack that we have today, there's just not the need for so much redundancy. So I broke it down in hours. I thought, well, here's how long it takes me to build a financial plan. And I just thought, well, my average client would be in the $1 to $2 million range. And I thought, well, it's going to take me X number of hours per year. And so I came up with that number. And then I don't know that I have an exact science for it after that, but the number ended up being somewhere in the 0.5% range. And then I thought, okay, well, that's quite a bit more reasonable than 1%. And then I just made it a firm dollar amount instead of a percentage. And then I just stacked on from there based off the things that I thought would increase as household net worth increased. So the fee is based on net worth, not assets managed. And I calculate net worth as total net worth minus primary residence.
Okay, so it is a net worth minus the house. And are you actually like subtracting out liability, so it's actual actual net worth, not just assets?
That's right.
Okay. So interesting about the house. So I've seen this done a few different ways, and again, there's no right answer. But why exclude the house if it is part of their overall net worth and could potentially influence the complexity of a client situation?
Yeah, my thought behind it was, and again, I don't know if this is super scientific, other than you're going to have a house always, and we're probably not going to have a ton of decisions to make around the house that aren't included in the general estate. So if you have rental property, I include all of those, because a lot of times we're having to do planning around that, but just the primary residence I left out.
Okay. So you have the net worth, and what is is it a percentage of net worth then?
Nope, it's a flat fee. So from 0 to $1 million is $5,000. $1,001 to two is 7,500, and then it goes up in $2,500 increments from there. And then I have on the website over $5 million is negotiated, and at this point I have a fee cap. I don't have that published on the website, but I do have a fee cap.
Yeah, it would be on your ADV. So no matter if do you manage investments? I mean, are you providing the investment management service to your clients?
Yep. So I'll do it either way. There's a couple of ways that I can engage with folks. One is what I call comprehensive financial planning, and that's holistic financial planning, and that's the fee structure I just listed out. And then the second way would be comprehensive financial planning plus investment management. And I charge a flat fee for the investment management as well. And I did that on a based off of a certain number of accounts. So if it's an individual, it's $1,000 in addition to the other fee, and that covers 4 accounts. If it's a husband and wife, or if two married couple, up to 6 accounts, and that's $1,500. And then I have a per account fee addition if it goes over that limit.
So you're not charging an asset-based fee, it's an account-based fee, really.
That's right.
So how did you come up with that? That's pretty unique.
Well, in my opinion, the investment planning, so investment planning and investment management are two different things, right? And the investment planning that I can provide to a client, if they're going to do it on their own, doesn't take a whole lot less time than if I'm doing it. So if I go through a plan with a client, I'm going to give them a portfolio and say, go invest this way if you want to manage your own investments. And so I still have to do the research, right, and build the portfolio. And so that cost is actually built into the comprehensive financial planning piece. The investment management is literally just me saying, we're going to move it to the custodian that I use, and I'll push the buttons for you.
Okay. So you really are Yeah, and I was actually just pulling up your website, so I can see this in one place. So if folks want to go, it's www.thesumplanning.com/fees. That makes it a really easy URL. And you have this broken down with the different annual fees based on net worth, and then the different fees for investment management, sort of standalone, or either standalone or if you combine them. How did you come up with these numbers, and do you feel good about them, whether it be on the net worth side or the investment management side? Are you finding that sort of your initial assumptions about what the fee levels needed to be, how much work would go into that relationship and all that makes sense, ended up being has been validated through this process?
Of course not. I'm kidding. I did make one adjustment very early on, but I think that was actually before it went live on the website. If you go under the fees tab, there's a how fees work page. And that's where I explain the difference of the typical 1% model that you would find at a full service firm versus mine. And so far, yes, I think it's working. And clients are receptive to it because a lot of if I can say this appropriately, a lot of the firms that charge 1% and say we do financial planning, they're maybe not providing complete holistic planning. Yeah. And so when you look at a client and say, well, I actually do holistic planning. I heard Kits is talking about this the other day. You're like, well, yeah, everybody says that. No, but we actually do it, right? And so, yeah, and I think the proof is in the service. Well, we are actually doing it, and that's what we're charging for. And so the accountability comes when, if I'm not providing what I say I'm providing, and the client's credit card gets charged, they're going to stop paying me for my service, right? Versus if I'm charging 1%, deducting it out of the account, people might go years before they say, well, we're going to question this and make some change, right? So I put it in there, I put it in front of them constantly, and I do my best to provide that financial planning service. And I think just the cost savings over the 1% model is wonderful for the client when you compare it to the other side. And then it's wonderful for me because I don't have to serve so many clients any longer.
It's interesting. I had a call this morning with an advisor who is also sort of a net worth based flat fee structure. And they said they were comparing their fees to the 1% folks in their area, and they were trying to charge more because they said, yeah, they do charge 1%, but they don't provide the level of service that we provide. And so therefore, like, we should be charging more, which is essentially what you're kind of saying it both ways in a way, which is, this is pretty typical conversation that we have with advisors. And that is, like, the 1% advisors are charging a lot more than you are, and they're providing a lot less. So, do you really feel like you need to charge less if you're providing so much more? Does that create an incentive for you to maybe back off the service model a little bit? Or do you see your fees maybe increasing over time because the market is willing to pay that fee for that level of service?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I've thought a lot about. Unfortunately, I don't know that I have a good answer for it right now. Of course, it would be nice to have additional income, but then I also think, is it fairly priced right now? My hourly rate that I advertise is $500 an hour. That's pretty high, but it's also, I think, fair based off of the value that we provide to folks. So could it be higher? It could. For now, I feel like it's pretty fair, and I feel like I'm fairly compensated. But I don't know. I think that an inflation adjustment down the road is certainly not out of the question.
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna go into full business coaching mode here. No, yeah, it is tough. And pricing's not an easy conversation. Again, I can push back and say you're providing way more than $500 an hour worth of value. If you weren't, people wouldn't pay you. Come to find out, consumers are actually really good at paying what things are worth and evaluating that decision, what it's worth to them. And so that is what's hard for me for the fee conversation, where I do encourage advisors, just because we're going fee for service versus AUM doesn't mean you have to be cheaper. It just means the fee structure and the way that you're charging and all that may be different. You could be higher price, you could be a little lower price than the advisors in your area. But I would argue, and people are welcome to disagree with this, but I would argue that clients aren't paying 1% simply because they don't see the fee. I think some may be, but I think they're paying the 1% because they see enough value in the service that an investment advisor is providing. And again, you're providing significantly more value than your typical investment only 1% guy down the road. And so, yeah, I don't know. I always encourage advisors, just really check that premise to be sure that you're appropriately charging what you can, because in the end, you're providing huge amounts of value. That being said, you run your business the way you want to run your business. There are no shoulds. That's why you started a business, is so you can do what you want to do. So, how do the conversations about fees go with clients? Because this is unique even amongst fee only advisors. And so, do you find do you have to sort of overcome the like, hey, I'm sorry, you've never seen this type of fee structure before. Let's talk about it. Or are clients like, yep, makes sense. Let's move on.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece that is probably more in my head than in the clients is that I have to tell them I'm not deducting this out of your accounts, and I refuse to do that, right? So I'm going to send you an invoice either monthly or quarterly, and it's either going to come out of your bank or come out of it's going to charge your credit card, you're going to write a check for it, however you want to do it. So I think that's probably the biggest piece. But for me, it's really simple to take a $5 million client who's paying their advisor $50,000 a year, and then they're in all of these high cost mutual funds on top of that. And this is the example I have right on my website. And maybe they're paying 80 basis points in fees on top of that. And so it's like, hey, you're paying 90 grand a year right now, and I'm telling you I'm going to do that for around 20 or so, right? And a lot of times there's not a whole lot of discussion that comes in after the fact.
Do you ever get and I don't think I ever experienced this, but have you ever gotten pushback on like, why are you so cheap? Like, what's the catch? Like, you're telling me you're half the price and provide more service. Why are you so cheap and everyone else is so expensive?
Not one time, actually. Well, I think when people have to pay it, on a credit card or out of their bank account, it's different. It's found money all of a sudden, and I think there's a behavioral piece to that is important.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, like I said, I have heard, I don't think I've ever heard of that conversation, but I have heard the conversation when flat fee advisors go to raise their fees and they go up by, $500 a client. That's when the client's like, oh, yeah, I knew you were undercharging. Yeah, like that.
I'll keep you posted.
So you mentioned early on that you're right at a year in, you've got 21 clients. That is some pretty significant growth. What percentage of those clients are comprehensive planning clients versus investment only versus planning only?
So all 21 are comprehensive financial planning. I have one project on top of that, and then probably next week or so I'll have my first investment management only client. But all 21 of those are in an ongoing model.
Okay. And then what of those, so what, the 20 that are doing comprehensive, or 21 that are doing comprehensive planning, how many of those are you doing investment management for?
Right now, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. So yeah, so they're opting to self-implement then the investments.
Yeah, and I think that changes a lot over the next 12 to 24 months, because I think maybe I was very empowering to folks, like, hey, go and do this, and maybe I didn't realize, okay, maybe it's not as easy as I thought it would be. So because it's a lot of, not to say that people aren't smart enough to do it, it's just that it takes time, and maybe people don't want to do it, and the differential in fee is certainly worth me doing it for them than them doing it on their own.
Yeah, and it's hard to monitor if it got done, and then you're making recommendations. You don't know if it got done. The other concern I've seen with advisors that, maybe they just send to a retail platform or Vanguard or something like that is just getting account statements. I mean, like, trying to remind your client to send you account statements, and it's hard to get, and then you're trying to figure out rebalancing and all that. Many times we find advisors end up doing more investment management in-house just because it does make the client's life easier. So 21 clients. So that is, I'll say, astronomical growth for your first year. Where have you found success from a marketing standpoint in getting in front of these prospective clients?
That's a wonderful question. I'm kidding. I've
I don't know.
no idea. This is home for me, so I've been here for a long time, and I think that that's been helpful. I've been involved in the community, and I think some people around just knew what I was doing. Online, I think the fee only network was probably the most bang for the buck that I ever paid for. It's very inexpensive, and now when people type in Michael Rahn, CFP, or fee only advisor, the Woodlands, I'm one of the first, if not the only ones to pop up. NAPFA has been wonderful. There's a local I'm going to say this, and if the gentleman that runs it hears it, he's not going to be happy with me. But it's like a fancy Craigslist. It's called the Woodlands Online, and it's local news and local advertisements. It's kind of like a chamber website, but it's not the chamber. It's a privately held. And so the Woodlands Online was really great to link to my website because they get a crazy amount of traffic. And then I did a little bit on Facebook and LinkedIn. I thought in my mind I was going to do a lot of blogging, and that sort of didn't last just from a timing standpoint. So those are pretty much it. And then everything else has come from referral or just word of mouth.
You mean you're growing a business without blogging? How dare you say such a thing on this podcast? Come to find out, you don't actually have to blog if you're not a good writer. So you said you started out blogging. Were you sort of shooting on yourself and like, oh, I should have a blog because I'm supposed to do that? Or do you have a passion for writing and felt like it was going to be a good avenue and just have outgrown the need for
I
it?
think a little bit of both. I feel like I had a lot to say, and in my mind, I thought, okay, in the past, clients just came to me. I didn't have to do that. And so I thought, well, I need to take the shotgun approach, and I have to do everything so that people can hear what I have to say and come and find me. And it just wasn't the case. One other thing I would mention too, and I've heard this on the podcast, is that there's a lot of advisors around that will charge the 1% fee. And if you take one of the oil companies around where there may be a very high net worth individual, but everything is tied up in an employer plan, then that advisor doesn't know how to charge the client to give them advice. And so I've gotten good business that way too. And that's not small, right? I may have a $3 or $4 million client that comes when a local advisor says, well, come see me when you retire and then I can help you. Yeah.
Yeah, it still cracks me up that that an advisor can't figure out a way to bill that client, just send them an invoice and have them pay you by check. Like there is an option there to just get paid. But it also this belief that that client's coming back. That at some point they're going to retire and be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that guy that only works with people who are rich, headed back there now." Like that's just not the way that works. That client's never coming back. So, yeah, it's just such an interesting attitude towards
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Agreed.
It sounds like you have a lot of different places the clients are coming from. You said you're finding a niche in sort of the oil and gas with retirees. Are you doing anything in particular to market to those folks, or is it really just sort of geography that you're there, everyone there is an oil and gas that has that has assets, and so therefore they're the ones who are showing up? Or are you really actively pursuing those clients?
Yeah. I think that it's the lazier version. I would say that the only way that I pursue them is that my fee structure is maybe tiered a little bit higher, and that I'm starting at a little bit higher point than $1,000 a year retainer maybe. But I'm not actively seeking those. I mean, I'm actively seeking them, but I'm not going out and doing anything. That's just who my clients are, and then by way of referrals, that's how they're coming in.
We do have to be careful here because I do want to be sure that folks who are thinking about starting a business do not believe that it is if you build it, they will come. And I know I've been guilty of giving that impression in the past, and you're making it sound easy when I know it's not. And I think you hit on a couple of good points. That one is that you are building a more local based business. In the end, you are working with clients that are a little more local. That something like the Woodlands local actually matters versus if you're building a virtual practice working with a really specific niche market that local search may not exist. But also, you spent a decade building a lot of relationships around, whether it be with existing clients or others that you actually built this referral network. And I think what a lot of folks just assume is like, oh, if I go launch an RA, people that I know will start sending me clients. But if you're not known as the financial person, that guy or that girl, and you're just moving in here into this space and opening a firm, like that's a much tougher road. So I just want people to be aware. Like I'm saying, I know it's harder than you're making it out to be, and I know it's sometimes hard to even dig in and be like, well, I don't really know, but like you are putting in a lot of effort to get these clients.
Yeah, you're spot on, and I think a big part of it goes back to I've been in the industry for a while, and I think we've been going to the same church for a long time, and we participate in small groups that we've been in for a long time, and this is home for me, right? I've just been here my entire life, and so I think that that has a big part of it, right? But the 10 years that I spent at another firm, learning my craft and learning how to interact with folks, I think helped a lot. And when that prospect does come in, I know what their concerns are and I know what they're worried about and I know how to speak with them. And when I help one of them, then they can refer a friend or a coworker who's struggling with the same thing. And it does take time, but the traction comes when you put in the time.
Okay, so that's where the clients are coming from. Talk to me a little bit about the sort of your service model and structure. So I'm a new client. I come in. I'm with you on your fees. I call it good. So I say yes. Sort of walk me through the meeting structure and sort of your overall planning process that you take clients through at that point.
Yep, good question. So this piece is a written work in progress on our side. The structure is not, because I've been doing it for a long time. But the first meeting I don't charge for. And the first meeting is just an interview, introductory, get to know each other. Let's have a cup of coffee and let me understand what it is that you're looking for. And then let me explain to you how I'm running my firm and the why behind it. And once we have all of that, then we dive into, okay, here's how the planning starts. I use Right Capital as my financial planning software. And that is, to me, step one in order to get organized for the client. So we get everything in one place. We have a meeting and make sure that all of the data is put together. And again, most of my clients are transitioning to income planning. So that requires going through cash flow planning with them and helping them understand what that looks like, tax planning along with that, and then the difference between living off of a paycheck versus living off of savings. So we spend a lot of time in that arena and massage it all inside of Right Capital. And it's very goal driven. There's no canned approach here for each person. We're really tackling each one of the goals that they have. And again, usually it starts with income planning. One of the firm, I don't want to call it a policy because it's not, but one of the firm goals is that estate planning is done for every client in the first 90 days. It's a challenge to get through that, but of all of the areas of financial planning, and I tell everybody again, it's retirement, income, investment, tax, estate, insurance, risk management. Estate planning is the immediate need that we have for folks. We're planning for a worst case scenario right now, whereas retirement, income, investment, tax, we're planning that you're going to live for 40 more years. And so if something happens to you and your estate is $3 to $5 million or $10 million or 20 million, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we've tackled that first. So it starts with the Right Capital conversation. We understand what those goals are. We go through cash flow planning. Estate planning happens pretty immediately after that. And from there, we go into investments and implementation, and then, whatever the next steps are for each client.
And then what is your ongoing service model? Are you meeting with clients quarterly or twice a year? I mean, because you're charging not a premium price, because as we discussed earlier, it's probably less than what other people are charging, but you're not doing, financial plans for $500 a year. So like you're charging a healthy fee. And are you meeting with clients pretty frequently and ongoing touch points, or is it more of a standard sort of meeting twice a year, occasional phone calls in between model?
Yeah, it's ongoing. And I don't have a firm, hey, we're only going to meet 4 times a year. There are some clients that I've met with 10 times this year already, and that's okay because I think everyone is different for what they need and what situation they're currently in. Now, one of the things that I'm working with, I have an employee now that is helping me with designing and writing all of this stuff down. So as one of the, I guess, goals for the next 12 months, if you will, is making sure that the financial planning process is written so that we can scale it, because I'm at a point where it's time to add another advisor and an operations person. And so the process thus far has just been a very white glove. Whatever you need, I'm going to proactively provide it to the best of my ability without putting a restriction on it.
So 22 or 21 clients, and your minimum fee, if I remember right from looking at your website, was about 4,500. So what is your revenue to date kind of going forward?
So if nothing changes between now and the end of the year, revenue is 201,900.
$202,000 in from month 6 to month 18. That's what we call astronomical growth. So let's just say that's not normal. So for listeners out there, I wish I could claim that because of XY Planning Network, everyone hits that number. That is not the reality. That is really fast growth. However, that's
We'll give credit to God here for the guidance.
yeah, I mean that is, that wasn't by luck, let's just say. So, but you are hiring and you're hiring pretty early, I would say. So generally 21 clients, we don't see a lot of folks hiring, but your revenue certainly supports it. So can you talk to me about the hiring decision and what's driving that decision to go ahead and hire ops manager and another planner in addition to the person that you already have?
Yeah. So one of the things that I struggle with right now is the service side of things, and so I could bring on a lot more clients right now a lot quicker if I had somebody helping with the ops and the service piece of it. And it's just something that I don't enjoy doing as much. I certainly enjoy being in front of clients more so than you know all the back office side of things. So it to me it's a calculated piece of I think I can bring the revenue to pay for the other employee ASAP if I have them here. And then along with that, I want to have the process written and ready to be scaled sooner rather than later. My goal is to have somewhere between, I tell folks 50 to 75. I don't know where that exact number is, but per advisor. And then add another head. So if I can do that and add a few more advisors after the fact, that will be a way for me to continue growing revenue. But that's what those employers would be for.
So talk to me about the goals for the business, because again, you've hit the ground running. You've hit a point that you can pick your head up, and you've sort of hit this revenue point where you're no longer thinking like, oh, I wonder if I could go get a job making what I'm making now. Like you're past that point. You have officially become unemployable. But you have the flexibility now to make decisions that will determine what kind of business you're building. I mean, if you wanted it to just be a solo and work with your 20 clients, you can make 200K net and it'll go up a little bit over time, be good, or you can grow a business or somewhere in between. So what are you thinking? Like what is in your mind in terms of what type of business you're going to build?
Yeah, good question. So my, I guess big thought is that I don't want to be spending 80 hours a week at work. It's not something that I think is healthy. Having said that, the company will look something like this ideally. I have my 50 to 75 or 80, whatever that number of clients is that I have the ability to serve. And I want to do that indefinitely. I love that. That part's a lot of fun. So that's not for sale. It's not for negotiation. There's families that I want to be a part of and help them generationally. So that's one piece of it. And then the second piece of it is I'd love to hire a handful of advisors, and I don't know what that number is, but folks who have a similar mindset and like the model, and I can, help them provide the same kind of concept that I did or am doing for my clients. So that would be part two. Maybe I have 5 to 10 advisors someday. The other piece, and this is something that I really struggle with, so if XY could do this, I wouldn't have to do it, it would be nice to find a trust company that has a similar fee structure set up that we at XY are attempting to do, right? So this flat fee for service type of model. I do a lot of estate planning with my clients, just given where they're at. And it's really nice to have a corporate trustee plug in who is not going to require that the assets get managed here, or is not going to work with me as the advisor, or is just not going to be friendly to the type of plan that we've spent years building. So I'm at the drawing board now. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it's feasible, but potentially kicking around the idea of starting a trust company.
That sounds like fun. Let's talk about that offline. Yeah, and these are the types of things that we start to see with our network of advisors that, they have a little bit different needs. So what need is not being met by the trust companies that are currently out there?
Full disclosure, there may be one, and maybe I get 10 phone calls after this fact and somebody, calls me out. But I guess if you have experience with this, right, when a client's assets go into trust after they pass and it goes in for their spouse or their children or whatever, usually, or not usually, but when they hire a corporate trustee, either as a co-trustee or the only trustee, that trustee requires that asset management be done in-house. And then there's just multi-levels of fees. You have the advisor fee, then you have the trust fee, and then you have the asset management fee. It just blows right past 2%. And so it's difficult for me to look my families in the eye that I'm serving and say, hey, we're going to do all this great planning, and then we're going to put this trustee involved. And when or if one of you passes away, I can't do the right thing for you any longer. So it would just be nice to have a seamless transition. And if we could do that in house, where the fee doesn't even change because the relationship stays, and we continue to serve that next generation in the same white glove manner that we're doing now, that would be incredible. So yeah, it would be nice. I'd prefer it if you did
I
it.
hear that a lot, I have to tell you. That's awesome. So when you look back over, the last year, things have been going really well, and it's easy just to focus on the big wins and the growth. But what have been some of your biggest struggles? Where would you say have been some areas where you've had missteps that maybe some listeners could actually learn from if they'll pay attention and hear what you've had to face and deal with?
Yes. Write down what you're doing ASAP. So the financial planning process is in my head, and this is how I've always run my business. And so I would have created the workflows. They're all created now, but I would have created them sooner. It just helps keep you and the client organized, and the service model, the output is cleaner. It's crisper.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when you're first starting out and you have nothing but time, it's really hard to get advisors to care about operations and process because it's just not top of mind until all of a sudden you realize one day you're really busy and you need to hire, and you don't have time to hire because you don't have time to train, because you don't have time to hand anything off because nothing's written down. And it is this balancing act of, in the end, I wish I had a magic pill that would motivate advisors to care about process, when they're first starting out. But I don't know that it exists without me like showing up and threatening them in their office. But you've got to start caring about it before you need to hire, because once you need to hire and you have to hire, then you put yourself in a bad spot. And there's some stuff we're working on here at XY with our new with Emily, our new financial planning and process coach, to try to provide at least the 80% solution so that advisors aren't all documenting from scratch. But I do appreciate that feedback that it is important to be paying attention to that, because a lot of advisors don't.
Yeah. I agree.
So what would you say have been some of your biggest wins? Some of the things that you're really proud of that, maybe other advisors who are listening in could replicate a little bit.
Can I give you 3?
Let's do it.
So the first is just learning to say no. It's really difficult when you meet someone new, or you want to help someone that you can't or you're not designed to, and it's okay to say no to something that doesn't fit your business model.
Like starting a trust company.
Like starting a trust company. Yeah. And the other is just that it's very possible to build a successful investment advisory firm if you put in the work and you prepare well. It's very possible. And I never imagined that I would be where I'm at right now. And, God is good. And so that, it's just been a big win that it actually worked. I wake up and I tell her, like, hey, we did this. This is awesome. But the other big one I would say is that I have a study group that, probably these guys will listen to this. And sometimes I'm not 100% with them. Sometimes I miss because I'm just super busy, but they are incredible. I met them at XY. I love being able to meet with those guys. And if you're not in a study group right now, you're missing out. So there's other people that are going through problems that you're not going through, or things that you didn't think about, or they've already gone through the problem that you're going through. And it's just wonderful to be able to look people in the face and say, hey, try this, or good job. Or when you're down, they pick you up. And so the study group is, to me, a big win.
And I do want to add to that, I love when study groups get together at the conference. Many times we find that's the only time they get together in person is actually at the conference. And we have some time set aside specifically for it, because it is so powerful to be able to get your group together. So if half your study group's coming to the conference and the other half's not, get that other half to come. And, we'll have some time set aside, a couple hours that you can do some stuff in person, or come a day early, stay an extra day, and be able to really work on the business with your fellow group members.
Yeah, love that.
All right, was that 2 things? Is there a third?
I think that was it.
Okay, we'll call that 3.
We'll call that 3. The success of the business was the third one. Just study group, learning to say no. RAAs are possible.
Okay, fair enough. And yeah, I still think it's funny that right before we started recording this, I had a call with a reporter, and it's still this like, so are what basically the question is, so you're saying this fee for service business model can work, and it's just like, yes, it can work. I can't believe we're still having this conversation right now. Cool, man. So as we're sort of coming to a close, I'll ask you the final question, and that is, maybe this is talking to yourself a year ago, or maybe this is further back in your career. But if there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, that one thing that you've learned that you know now that you wish you had known then, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
I'm not sure I would go back and change anything, good or bad decisions, but I would just say prepare well, trust in God, and relax. It's all going to work out.
Relax. That is probably something that we don't encourage enough, is go take time for yourself, time for your family. You have to take care of yourself because, I hate the words, I hate the terminology, the grind and the hustle. I think they're just so overused at this point, because what ends up happening is you grind and you grind and you grind, you grind yourself to pieces instead of actually building a business. Is that you have to take care of yourself and your relationship and you need to take care of your religious or your spiritual wellness, as well as your physical wellness and your mental and your relational. All those things matter if you really want to be your whole self to run the business. So just something
Time off is so important. It's very important.
Have you been able to take time off in your first year?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my wife and I have a goal of, we take a week a quarter, and it hasn't necessarily worked out that way. We missed the first quarter, so those 6 months were a challenge, but we did just take 2 weeks off, and it was incredible. I think you have to pencil that in, and you have to make time to just turn things off, unplug. The business is so much better when you come back to it.
I love it. Well, great words of wisdom for our listeners out there. So thank you, Michael, for taking the time to come on the show, man. I really appreciate it, and excited to hear what's going to come from the next year or two in the business.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate what you guys are doing.
Have you ever wished there was someone to handle the time-consuming tasks of researching, performing due diligence, monitoring, trading, and rebalancing your firm's assets under management, or someone to facilitate reporting, billing, and invoicing for your firm? XY Investment Solutions, powered by XY Planning Network, handles all of that and more, leaving you free to focus on what you do best, serving your clients. Learn more about this turnkey asset management platform built for the next generation of financial planners and their clients at xyinvestmentsolutions.com. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.